All right, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Veteran Voices in Code. I am joined today by recent graduate of Code Platoon, Mike Durell. Mike, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks for having me, Greg.
So the first question, and we like to jump right into it here at Code Platoon. The first question that I've been starting off with, and I think is going to become a tradition, is you're a veteran. What made you raise your right hand? What compelled you to say, yep, I want to do this?
Well, I was younger, and I wanted to see the world, and I wanted to have that life experience. And I just I had worked as an accountant before, and I just wanted to do something interesting and rewarding.
Fantastic. And so you went in as Intel, correct?
Hmm.
And how many years?
I ended up doing 15 years.
15 years. Fantastic. That's awesome. So you're coming to this 15-year mark, which is kind of that real make or break time in any enlisted soldiers, time of, do I want to go the full 20 or am I going to get out now and make that decision? What compelled you to make that decision to say, no, this isn't for me. I'm not going to keep going. I value what I've done, but I'm not going to keep going on this path.
So to be honest, I was going to finish out the 20 years because I had committed so far, and the pandemic hit, and a bunch of tech people from the Bay Area moved to Hawaii, and I started dating one of them, and the military was no longer conducive to my goals in terms of wanting to start a family. And I got some insight into the lifestyle and learned a little bit more about tech, and it seems like a great option, and I had always been interested in it, but I suppose I had a limiting belief that it was reserved for a certain group of people. But as I met more and more people, it seemed like something I could do, and I had somebody behind me encouraging me, so that definitely helped. And I that's why I made that decision.
Fantastic. And that's always a good decision. I mean, I've said this back in 2009, at some point the family life and the military life, there seems to be some conflict there. So, making that decision, I think, is always a noble one. So you had the opportunity though to do, and now you found Code Platoon, but you had the opportunity to do SkillBridge. So just give a brief overview of first of all, finding out about that, and second, kind of just a brief synopsis of what that process was like and how that helped.
Well, so I was looking at various boot camps, and Code Platoon just in my search came up, and it was veteran friendly, and it was already set up for SkillBridge. So I figured that it would be an easier process to do, which it turned out not to be. But I was fortunate enough that I had a lot of good support from my command in terms of facilitating that. But there's also we do have a recruiting crisis and retention crisis. So there are some new policies coming out that made it extremely difficult, and I was just very fortunate to be able to still participate in the program.
Sure. And real briefly, and I have to back up and apologize. I mentioned soldier earlier. You were in the Navy, right? So I that was my bad. My misspoke. But so tell just a little bit, like, do you think that SkillBridge as a process, you said that it's starting to get harder, but you were able to do it. What would you say is the common hurdle other than these new policies? And how did your command navigate that in a way that was maybe better than what you were seeing going on elsewhere?
So I would say if it's something that you want to do, start early. I remember we had this conversation that I applied for the cohort. I was over a year out, and I remember I was going through, and you hadn't even convened Whiskey Platoon yet, but I remember talking like, I just need something saying that I'm in so that I can route this paperwork. And I was just very adamant, um, and also doing good turnover, and you know, taking care of my job as well, and kind of navigating both of those. so that they would be more inclined to give me that opportunity.
Sure. And so, I mean, it seems to me, and this seems to be a common theme with all SkillBridge, and for anybody watching this, by the way, it's called CSP in the Army, Career Skills Path or Program. I can't remember which. The Army, and I'm an Army veteran, we always have to do things different. Of course, all of DoD calls it SkillBridge, but the Army calls it CSP. Just for their, knowledge if anybody happens upon this video. So I see a consistent theme, which is exactly what you're saying, being proactive and staying on top of it and really kind of, pushing that forward is almost a must to be able to participate in that. Is that kind of like overall, is that what you saw?
Yes, because I mean, as you know, with the military, or for that matter, any large organization that has a lot of administrative overhead, especially like in my case, my commands, like my administrative chain of command was in San Diego. I was in Hawaii. So again, navigating that and just everything takes longer than you think it's going to. So again, I can't emphasize enough being proactive in terms of what you want to do, and demonstrating to everyone, and just being extremely persistent, following up, um, I think is really the key.
Sure. And once you got that approval, once you had that secured and your command said, yes, we gave you the thumbs up, you can do this. Were they supportive from that point forward? And did you have what you needed to be able to do it? And the reason I ask this, just for context, is that I think a lot of people in the military who approach this SkillBridge path, they kind of have this hesitancy of like, it's too good to be true, right? We're like, I understand you say I can do this, but are you really going to let me? Like, am I going to get 2 weeks into it and you're going to call me away for duty? So once you got that approval, were they actually supportive, and did everything go smoothly from there?
They were absolutely supportive, and I would also say that one of the decisions I made, both personally and I guess professionally, for that, is that I did do the in-person. One, it would be easier to focus, not living in Hawaii with my friends calling me on the weekends, right? And
Sure.
then two, it was just kind of a mental shift. And they also knew that, like, okay, like this date's gonna come and I'm not gonna be here. Like, so, barring, war breaking out or something, I'll, you agreed, I'll be in Chicago doing this. So both for myself and for my command, it's just when that program started, that was the path that I was on.
Sure. And I can see that being a huge benefit of there's not a danger of somebody knocking on your door. There's not somebody going to be knocking at your door and saying, hey, we need to do this thing. You're not there. Now, did that require, to be able to travel to Chicago to take place in person, did that require an extra layer of approval?
No, not particularly. Like, once I mean, as part of my package that I submitted, I put that I would, be in Chicago. So, approving the package, was approving that I would be physically present in Chicago. I would say the main things that I ran into is that, as you know, as you're transitioning, all of your medical appointments, everything, no matter how far out you plan, you know, there's a lot of things that have to happen within 180 days or 90
Right.
days. Or I didn't have separation orders, before I left. And so I couldn't do my household goods. So, that became a thing. I did a handful of medical appointments while I was in Chicago. And then once I finally, had my separation orders, then now, okay, I'm coordinating my household goods, but I'm not there. So what I ended up having to do at the end, I basically graduated. I had that weekend, and then I flew back to Hawaii so I could meet with the movers and coordinate all that and do my, my final out processing, I suppose. I mean, it can definitely be done, but I would just say you just have to be extremely proactive, and extremely, persistent.
Sure. And that's a fair point to consider. I mean, we just talked about the upside of, if you're in person in Chicago, nobody's doing the hey you detail, nobody's coming in and grabbing you. But the flip side of that is exactly what you're saying, is that sometimes you have to be on base to take care of things in your last 180 days. So, anybody who happens upon this, like, be aware that there is a downside to that too. I can see a huge advantage to being in person, and I recommend anybody who can come to our in-person classroom. But exactly what you said, there are some potential downsides to that. But you navigated it. No, nonetheless, you did all of this and you were successful. What in the end, so you got finished with Code Platoon, you graduated. What would you say is the biggest change from going through the process compared to what you thought it would be, including SkillBridge? Like, you wrap SkillBridge up into this, and maybe you had the idea of X in your mind and it turned out to be Y. Why is it Y and not X, right? Let's put it in algebraic formula. Why not?
Right. So obviously, and we spoke to this a bit, SkillBridge definitely took longer, and it took a lot of proactiveness on my part. So I thought, I thought it would be good to go, but I mean, it's still, just because everything goes until the last minute, it was still, like down to the wire that I had everything. So I mean, I would be lying if I said that didn't create a bit of anxiety. But again, I place that solely on large organization, and that's coming, from the top, not a reflection of my experience with my local command at all.
Sure. Sure.
In terms of going to Chicago, I mean, I honestly felt, between, all the stuff I was doing with the military and my place and all that, my life was down to 2 suitcases. So it became very simple at that point, right? I mean, I stayed at a place that was relatively, close to the office, and even on the weekends, just from that mental perspective, I would, often go there on the weekends, just because it's like, okay, you're at work, it's time to work. And then I think really just, it feels like a fire hose at first. Absolutely. I had prepped for it, and I'd gone through and done some of the lead code and, some of the introductory coursework, and you have to go through and do the application. But then when you get there, it's a lot of information all at once. And I would say there's definitely a variety of, skill sets, to where, there were many times that I was like, why am I the only one struggling here? Right? Like, it just seemed like, was there another course, or but I think just taking that in stride, and just, okay, we're all at different places, but we're trying to get to the same place. So if that just means that, I need to, put in the extra time and effort, and seek guidance, then that's my path.
Sure. Sure. On that note, and it's a good point that you brought up. Did you feel that there were times, obviously you just said that there were times where you felt like you were struggling and nobody else is. Did you ever feel the reverse? Were there times when you're like, oh, I get this, but then somebody else said, well, I don't get this at all. Was that the case for you, or?
I mean, there might have been a couple times, but I think just, if you find yourself in, the enviable position that you're, doing extremely well on that, I think both from, just a good team member perspective, or maybe also for your own, I mean, you actually learn things extremely well by teaching, someone else. So I think if you are in that position and you can help somebody else, that's a great thing for both of you. And if you're and maybe your opportunity to pay forward, because I don't think there'll be anybody that's going to take this course. I mean, if they're getting through this course with no troubles and they're not asking for any help, why are they not already in the industry
Why are they
doing
here?
this, right? So
No, absolutely. And I think that's exactly right. And it's a common theme that I've heard among Code Platoon alumni over the last 4.5 years for me, is this idea of, yeah, there were things that I struggled with, and then there were things that I thought were a little easier. But there is that communal aspect that I think the military culture engenders, right? Of it doesn't matter if it's a little easier for me. I'm not going to run off and do my own thing. I'm going to help those behind me to, bring them along because we're all part of this same goal. And I think that's huge when you compare it to other boot camps out there that maybe don't, like, they might have 100 people from the civilian background and there's 2 military people there and they're like, I'm lost. And you just don't have that same sense of camaraderie. On that note though, so with your background, and everybody's military background is a little bit different, even though we share commonalities, what would you say is the biggest thing that you brought with you from the military that helped make this happen? Like, what lessons from your military career, 15 years, it's no short amount of time, helped you the most?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily unique to me. I would say it's more just a common thread throughout the military. Like, I don't care if you did 4 years or, retired out at deployed or not, at some point you were in a situation where you had to accomplish a lot of things and you didn't fully know what you were doing, and you just had the people around you. So I think just the camaraderie and grit is the recurrent theme that would make anyone successful in this. Over enough time and enough repetitions, wherever you're at, if you really want to learn everything and be successful in the course, then you're just going to do what you need to do.
Sure, sure, absolutely. And do you think, like, now drilling down a little bit more specific on that question, your job as intel in the military, were there any commonalities there, or was this just a totally new endeavor? Like, are you looking at this like, I am jumping into an entirely new realm, or did you see maybe some similarities that said, hey, this is why I want to go here?
Right. So my whole the whole reason that I wanted to learn to code is that I just found throughout my career, I was constantly just trying to find ways. And as you know, it seems like sometimes you're spending 80% of your time trying to get out of your own way, doing, whether it be admin or whatever it is. And I would try and find ways to improve things, and most of the time, I mean, just because it's a basic Office suite, it would be Microsoft Excel, and hey, let's just try and agree that maybe this process will be more effective. But I had a handful of times where, oh wow, if I knew how to make a web portal or I knew Python, imagine what I could do with that. But I think during those times, it was like I was already so busy, I didn't have time to like learn it and for lack of a better analogy, build the plane as it's flying, right? Um, so it was always something that I was interested in, and I just think having the opportunity with the GI Bill and being able to work on those job skills towards the end of my time in the Navy, I think just was kind of the perfect match. And I saw that as a great opportunity, and I valued my experience going through that.
Sure. No, that's a fantastic answer. So you did mention, and this is another subject that we're now headed into, but you mentioned at the beginning, before you went in the military, you had a little bit of another career. You were working in accounting, correct?
Mhm.
Right. So
Yes.
what
Oh,
was
go
your
ahead.
what was your experience with that, and like how much influence did that have on this direction, either positive or negative? Like, oh, I definitely don't want to go back into that, or yes, I kind of liked aspects of that. And then we'll tie that into the ongoing question of, there's a lot of people, and I'll preface this for those who might be tuning into this. There's a lot of people who go out of the military and go into an MBA program. They see the MBA as kind of the catch-all. It's a solution to what I want to do next. Well, we have a little bit of experience with that, but I want you to, set the context here first of what you did before you went in the military, and then we'll kind of get to that.
Okay, so, and I'll caveat this is, I mean, I graduated with my MBA in 2007, so this is dated. But I would say when I got out of high school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and that first summer I moved out and I was roofing houses for $8 an hour, right? And I didn't I didn't see that I didn't want to continue doing that. And so I was interested in business, and at the time is when WorldCom, Enron. So there was a lot of opportunity within accounting. They needed accountants. And I mean, I went to a state school. It wasn't, you know, I felt that my best opportunity to have options when I got out is to have a definable skill. And so at that time, it was accounting.
Mm,
So I did my undergrad in accounting, and then in order to take the CPA exam, you had to have 150 hours.
mhm.
So, some people will stay and just do more coursework at their original organization, but I felt that, I could maybe round out my skill set a little bit. And at the time, I went to a 1-year MBA program because that would, give me the credits I needed. And I thought that that could be, beneficial going forward. Also, I was looking for jobs in the local area. So, um, again, this is just my experience, but I found, St. Louis tends to be somewhat insular. A lot of the places I went, or people you meet often went to local universities, so you do have that network. And then, in fact, I want to do a little shout out to career services. It's very interesting how unexpected opportunities will come across, because as I finished the MBA program, I was on the job search, and I was doing the same thing that everyone's doing right now, trying to brush up the resume, trying to do the interviewing skills, and a firm offered to do resume reviews.
Mm.
And so they were doing the resume reviews, and then the HR person saw that I had an accounting background. It happened to be an accounting firm. Next thing I know, I've got a couple interviews, and that was my first job.
That's
So
great.
yeah, so I was, very, very fortunate in that regard.
Sure.
It worked out well. And, I did get some good experience just doing, process improvement. It was mostly in, Excel and Word documents. And that's kind of where I started to, get into Excel, because I needed a way to be more efficient with with my job.
Sure.
So that was my route. That's why I chose to do an MBA. But I mean, I can say honestly, like, up until, like, I've never really, aside from it meeting the credit hour requirements and then getting that resume review, I wouldn't say I've fully, utilized it throughout my career. I'm leaning back on it now, but
Sure.
I'll say the flip side of this, without the GI Bill, I was $90,000 in debt. I only, so that is a huge burden to carry for someone, not to mention the opportunity cost. I know a lot of people join the military out of high school, and okay, you have health insurance. If you do your 20 years, you're vesting a retirement, you have money coming in. um I would say, even in my case, where it was just a 1-year MBA program, I mean, you're talking 5 years where you're pretty broke and going into debt.
Right.
And then you're starting, especially if you're carrying a lot of debt, you're starting with your shoes tied, right? Because, right, you're making a little bit more, you're making more money, hopefully, but, also entry level. But how much is that student loan payment, which is non-dischargeable in bankruptcy, by the way?
Right.
So,
Important to
right,
remember.
right. But in terms of, I think, I don't know if you're gonna go into like coding versus MBA, or was that
Well,
your
I think the best
question?
way to do that, because I think everyone out there would, they would know that these are very different tracks, right? It's not like a different way to do the same thing. This is a different path. And so what I wanted to explore with you maybe is maybe answer the question of, so you're getting out, you already have an MBA. You've just done 15 years of the military. You've already got the MBA, but you're recognizing that's not what I want to lean on, at least not entirely. Right. And it's great to have that on your resume and to have that so that you can, start a career and maybe give you a leg up. But at some point you said, that's not what I want to fall, like, that's not what I want to be my primary goal driving forward in a career. What made you say that? What made you say, not going back to that, I want to push forward into software as an alternative? Because these are very different worlds, right? I think they can complement each other, but they're different.
Right. So I think, and this is just my opinion, but as I've seen, it seems like where you see a lot of the cuts in tech, and you've like, 2020, when people were working from home, they went on, big hiring binges, but then you've seen a lot of cuts. And what my general perception is that companies are valuing, if you're, executive leadership, and you're shaping the course of that company's, financial future and return to shareholders, et cetera, that's incredible value add. If you're the person that's creating the product, selling the product, right? You're not an expense item. But it seems where a lot of these cuts are coming from is in the middle, right? You're not in the C-suite, and you're
Right.
not producing the product, but you're making a pretty good amount of money, right? So it seems that, if someone had a career where they were, very senior and could navigate that into, the C-suite perhaps, and again, just my perception. And then especially if you can get into a top 10 MBA program, and that's what you really want to do. You want to lead and manage, and that's your focus. Then it would make a lot of sense with the network you have from that, with the military experience you have, and having that recent, top 10 MBA program on there. It seems like that's a great bridge for that route.
Sure.
I think if you find yourself in the middle, right, then maybe you reskill and you have more of a, a tech focus. I mean, everyth's tech now, right?
Right.
So
Right.
have more of a definable skill set that you can use to show that you're a value add to a potential employer. In my case, a little bit different. I, you know, with companies, even on, I went a route with, process improvement, but even with that, they're using a lot of new technologies. AI is big now, at a minimum, to show that, okay, I went through a 3-month intensive training program, right? Obviously this is something I'm interested in pursuing, and I have a
Right.
general baseline of understanding that I could add value to your company from there, because I'm not in the C-suite, right? But
Right.
I have
Right.
generalized, business experience, and then um, I have both a desire and, a good baseline level of knowledge for the things that companies seem to be concerned with.
Sure. And and we only have a few minutes left here, but from a practical perspective, and we'll just keep it as a simple answer. From a practical perspective, let's say there's another student coming along in your same boat and they want to do both. Which would be harder to do while working? Let's put it that way. So would you suggest to that person, do Code Platoon as an immersive boot camp like you did, and then get a job, get your MBA in the evenings, or the opposite, get an MBA full time, and then do even Code Platoon evening and weekends or something like that? Which would be harder to do? Does that make sense? Like part time, I'm working a full time job. Which is harder on the evening structure?
I think, I honestly think that, you know, and speaking also to the networking aspect, right? I think the best opportunity for someone that was weighing those two is you'll get the most out of the boot camp if you devote everything to that and completely immerse yourself in that. And then, and again, I have a couple classmates, we, you know, discussed this as well. And then once you get through that, if it's your intent to, you know, round out your business acumen, I think a great, you know, like a night and weekend program, because then you're not having to take a year or two of your life off while you don't have, you know, money coming in, and you're getting the same diploma and you're getting the same network, right? So
Right.
I feel like a night and weekend MBA could make a lot of sense, but you're I think like if like you'll get the most bang for the buck, if you will, just completely immersing in the boot camp.
I happen to agree. I mean, for the record, I've done a couple of master's degrees online, you know, and I think that requires less intense, like just dedication than what Code Platoon does. And so I happen to agree 100% with what you're saying. I think you get more out of, now for those who only have the evening weekend option, great. I still recommend Code Platoon. People do very well with that. If you can do the immersive program, though, I think that's the way to go. So we're almost out of time. I always end with two fun questions. You can hit them as fast as you want. First question is, number one, do you listen to music while you code? And if so, what music? And question number two, what's your favorite movie of the last 2 years?
My favorite movie of the last two
Yeah.
years. So don't listen to music when I code, because I find it distracting.
That seems to
And
be
then
a pretty universal answer, by the way.
and maybe this is cliche, but I thought I guess in the last two, I thought Top Gun Maverick was amazing. I love that
No,
movie.
no, I loved it. I loved it. I saw the original in a theater when I was 13. My dad took me to see it. That's dating me. That tells you how old I am. I was 13 years old and I saw the original, and I was going to be a fighter pilot. I was going to, like, that was amazing. Then I learned that you had to go to school for engineering. I was like, well, that's out. That's not me. But
That
then
was
I
the greatest.
went and saw this new one, and I was just like, it grabbed the 13-year-old boy in my soul, and it was like, yes, yes.
It's the greatest recruiting campaign the Navy's ever had.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. And the stuff that, you know, some people critique and say, well, it's not exactly realistic. I don't care. I really don't care. I know that it's not, but it was amazing still. So now I'm right there with you. Well, Mike, thanks for joining us. I sincerely appreciate it. Any passing thoughts? We've got exactly 3 minutes left. So any passing thoughts to pass on to the next generation of Code Platoon students?
No, it was a great conversation. I'm happy to do it. And as I think the biggest thing, you know, I speak to the MBA networks. Well, we've got a great network here, being Code Platoon. Feel free to share my email, contact information if you want to put it in the tag to this video. If anybody has any questions, they're thinking about the program, they're in the program, they're done with the program. I'm not the poster child, but I could speak to my experience, and if that gives someone some value, I'd be more than happy.
Well, and we greatly appreciate it. And then for the record, you're way more of a poster child than you think. So, I mean, this is, you know, it's perfect. We love it. And we wish you the most successful endeavor as you move forward. And thank you for being part of the Code Platoon community. Until next time, I'm Greg Drobny here as your recruitment community outreach manager. You can hit me at greg@codeplatoon.org. I can certainly put you in touch with Mike if you want to talk with him more. But hey, thanks for tuning in and look forward to next time. Thanks again, Mike. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.